Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I always make clear, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And to do so, we don't just focus on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we examine the system that makes bad policing possible. And today, that's exactly what we're going to do by looking at a pattern of behavior by cops in a small Colorado town that has led to a series of questionable incidents, including the shooting of a dog and the violent arrest of a 73-year-old woman with dementia. But the videos only tell part of the story, and we will investigate why this suburban enclave has spawned so many national stories of police overreach. But before I get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com, and we might be able to investigate for you. And of course, you can always message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Facebook or Twitter. And please like, share, and comment on our videos. It really does help us. And you know I read your comments and appreciate them. And if you can, hit our Patreon donate link below, and we have some special goodies for our Patreon family. Okay. Now we've gotten that out of the way. Now, as you already may know, Stephen and I got our start covering policing in the medium-sized city of Baltimore, Maryland. It has been and still is a hotbed of police corruption. Notably, in 2016, the Department of Justice found that the Baltimore City Police Department had been engaged in a practice of unconstitutional and racist policing for years. And recently, we were home to the notorious Gun Trace Task Force, a group of 8 officers who robbed residents, dealt drugs, and stole overtime. But since we've been producing the Police Accountability Report, we have found that big cities are not the only communities where police feel free to run amok. In fact, we have obtained a series of police encounters caught on body cam that reveal a disturbing trend that has become a stark reality in this country: aggressive policing in communities that are hardly cauldrons of crime. That's why the focus on today's show will be a fairly tranquil suburb of Denver known as Loveland. The city of roughly 71,000 residents sits just an hour north of Colorado's most populous city. It's a relatively quiet community, best known for having one of the largest sculpture gardens in the world. It also has a crime rate well below the national average, which Stephen will be talking about later. All the elements of what most would say is a town hardly in need of a large and aggressive police force. But like many towns in this country, that is not the case. Not hardly. Instead, as you can see in these body camera videos, Loveland police have been involved in some troubling cases that have brought national attention to the town's law enforcement agencies. A series of brutal incidents that only emphasize the point that Americans' unchecked hunger for law enforcement has led to a myriad of abuses. The first incident involves this: the arrest of 73-year-old Karen Garner, a woman who suffers from dementia. On June 26 of 2020, Garner had been shopping at a local Walmart when she forgot to pay for roughly $14 worth of goods. While walking home along the highway picking wildflowers, she was confronted by Officer Hopp, who instead of assisting the woman who promised to pay for the items, instead took her to the ground violently, fracturing her arm and dislocating her shoulder. We will show the video, but I warn you, what happens in this footage is upsetting to watch.
Do you need to be arrested right now? No. Okay. Let's stop. Come on. Come on.
I'm going home.
No, on the ground. Stay on the ground.
I'm going home. I'm going home.
On the ground. On the ground.
I'm going home.
Stop.
I'm going home. I'm going home. I'm going
Quit!
Ow! I'm going home.
But that's not where this story ends. After the incident, video obtained by Garner's attorney, who we will be talking to later, shows Loveland police joking about her injuries. Let's watch them in action.
I'm super excited. what happened when you got off stage? You was like, short motion to say.
Yeah, we talked a little bit. But she's so little, I'm like, I'm going to say, hey, I'm fighting, have everyone in the city run code and brainstorm.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm fine, I can handle it. I mean, dogs. So, I was like, all right, let's wrestle, girl. Let's wrestle. Right on the ground, all that stuff. Got her cuffed up. That was eerie. And then I had her get the girlfriend. She showed up and hurt.
But the cuff was like here on her hand. I'm like, oh.
also interesting to note how one of the officers seemed to feel uncomfortable about what occurred, but then is later encouraged by her colleague not just to accept the violence, but revel in it, as you can see here.
How do you think that went?
Well, that went great.
You do?
Did you know? Apparently you did not.
No, I did.
I thought we were pretty crushed.
But every time I would try to jump in, like I got pushed off to the side, so I don't want you to think that I'm not acting.
I didn't think you were. I thought you were right in there the whole time.
It's important to note that as these officers were reviewing the body camera footage of Miss Garner's arrest, she was left sitting in a cell without medical treatment for nearly 6 hours, while the officers fist bumped each other and joked about her being senile, old, and flexible. But that's not the only shocking video of Loveland police in action. Just 1 year prior, another brutal incident occurred on June 29th when Wendy Love and Jay Ham parked in an empty lot to stretch their legs and walk their dogs. The owner of the lot had spotted them on a security camera and called the police. But when Loveland police officer Matthew Grashorn arrived on the scene, before he even spoke to the couple, he did this. Let's watch again, and I must warn you, this video is very shocking to any animal lover, so please skip forward if you might find this upsetting.
Get back to the truck!
He just made my baby! Why did you have to shoot him? He's fine, he's a puppy!
Get to your truck! I didn't know that!
He's a puppy! Can I see him?
Get to the truck!
Even after the dog was shot, the couple begged the officer to allow them to take him to a nearby vet, but he refused. Let's listen, but remember, again, this is heartbreaking to
He
hear.
will bite you, he's hurt. He will bite you, he's hurt.
You killed him!
He will bite you, he's hurt.
Jay!
Sir, tell her to get away. He will bite her, he's hurt. Maybe you ought to have your dogs in your truck then. Is this your property? That's why I'm here, because you're trespassing.
Can we take him to a vet, please? Can we take him to a vet?
Ma'am,
Please,
you're not going to be able to help him.
please let me take him to a vet.
You're not going to be able to help him.
Please, sir.
You're not going to be able to help him. I need you to stay there.
Once the dog was brought to the vets, Loveland officers repeatedly told the staff that Herkimer was a vicious pit bull who attacked one of our officers. A sergeant told the officers to write Wendy and Jay a ticket for a vicious dog because the owners were going to share their story with the press. And in another incident that has raised serious questions about the department, police were asked to respond to a mental health crisis for 19-year-old Alex Domina. The incident began when his legal guardian called 911, concerned that he threatened to harm himself. Police knew he had been recently released from a mental health institution. However, it didn't take long for the encounter to turn violent. And again, I must give a warning that this video is very difficult to watch.
Alex, man, I need you to stop and just talk to me, bro. Put the knife down, brother. Stay over there. Do not come near me. Don't come near me. One at gunpoint, he's not stopping. Don't come near me. Stop. Stop, Alex. Stop, man. Don't make... 236, shot fired.
Domina was mortally wounded and is currently hospitalized. Police, meanwhile, have been tight-lipped on if this shooting is being investigated or on the status of the officer involved. And finally, even Good Samaritans have been on the receiving end of Loveland police violence. In September of 2019, Preston Soul stopped to assist a downed motorcyclist and to lend a helping hand to lift the motorcycle he was pinned under. When police arrived and asked for a statement, he said he didn't see the actual accident and didn't wish to speak on the record. Loveland police insisted on seeing his ID, and when he refused, he was cuffed and taken to the ground so forcefully he needed shoulder replacement surgery. Let's watch.
I'm not leaving.
Okay, then come and talk to me.
No, I'm not going to come talk to you. I'm not going to come talk to you.
Police officer, man.
I know.
Did you
but I'm
pull
not
the
gonna come
bike?
talk
Did
to
you
him.
pull the
I'm
bike
not
off
gonna
him?
come talk to him.
Did you pull the bike off him?
I did not.
Okay.
So
You just told me
it
you
has
did.
nothing to do with me.
Okay, you're free to leave.
Yeah, you're free to leave.
What's his name?
Preston. That's all.
Preston what?
I don't know.
You got ID on your boss?
No,
I'm gonna need an ID
no
now.
ID.
Okay.
No.
Well, 177. I got an uncooperative witness. Come on over here.
Constitutional right.
I need to talk to you.
Constitutional right. No.
I need to talk
I
to
don't
you.
want to talk to you.
You have to talk
I don't want
to
to talk. No, I don't.
You do.
No, I don't.
Okay, you've
No, I
inserted
don't.
yourself.
I came down here to help them.
So,
no, I don't have to talk to
this is
anybody.
going to go one of
I
two
don't
ways.
have to talk to anybody.
This is going to go
I
one
don't
of
have
two
to talk
ways.
to anybody.
Okay, either
I
you're
don't
going
have
to
to
sit
talk to
here and
anybody.
talk to me,
No.
we'll just have a short
No.
conversation,
No.
or I'm going to
I
arrest
don't
you
have
for
to.
obstruction.
No, you're not. I'm not obstructing
You
anything.
are.
You're right here.
Okay.
I'm not obstructing nothing.
Okay.
These guys
Please
are taking care of it.
Please just come talk to me.
No.
Okay, turn around.
I don't want to talk to you.
Turn around right now.
No.
Turn around.
Videotape this, Sherry.
I'm already
Video-
doing
no.
it. It's right here.
No.
Turn around.
No, you're wrong.
Turn around.
My constitutional rights.
Turn around.
I don't have to talk to you. I
Turn
don't have to.
around.
I don't have to ID myself.
Turn around.
He's being
Turn around.
fucking
Put-
lovely cop. Yeah, he is.
You mind
I
backing up?
came down here to help.
Just back it up.
I don't know what
Back up.
happened,
Back
and I'm
up.
telling him that. I'm telling him that. I
Put
don't
your
know what
hand.
happened.
Put your hand
Why
behind your
does he
back.
want to talk to me?
I'm not telling you again.
No,
Preston,
no,
put your hand behind your back
no,
now.
no. You're being wrong.
Put your hand.
You're being wrong.
he's gonna-
Videotape this, Sherry.
He's gonna get you if you don't put your hand on
Videotape
it.
this
Hey,
shit. What are you fucking with me for? What are you fucking with me for? What are you fucking with me for? What the fuck are you fucking with me for? I have nothing to do with this.
But the bigger question is, what is going on in this town? Why is the police department of a town that touts a prominent love sign as its communal symbol of hope so aggressive and quick to use deadly force? And more important, what threat of crime, real or imagined, has prompted this kind of aggressive policing? To answer these questions and more, I'm joined by my reporting partner, Stephen Janis, who's been looking into these questions. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Stephen, I would assume that Loveland has a bad crime problem. First, how crime-ridden is this town, and how big is the police department?
It's a very safe town. No homicides in terms of robberies, assaults, most major crimes, lower than the national average, lower than the average in Colorado. Really, it's an extremely safe town, safer than the average community in the United States. And like I said, no homicides at all, so really not a dangerous place.
So you asked some questions of the town's political leadership. What have you learned?
Well, what we kind of do is we kind of flip the script here, because normally we ask the police department for comment, but I thought let's ask the people who actually control the police department for comment. So I emailed every person on the council, including the mayor, and said, hey, what's your comment about this police department? What do you think about some of these incidents that occurred? And I got one answer back from one council person who said there's an internal investigation. Now that prompted another question. Who's running this investigation and who is investigating whom? And they have not answered that. But we do know that there is an investigation. It's just not who is doing it and what the outcome will be.
How much does the city spend on policing, and what does this tell you about law enforcement in the city in general?
Well, according to the budget documents I reviewed, the city spends about $25 million a year on policing. That's about 25% of the city's budget. That includes 95 sworn officers, 140 employees. This is more than other departments like recreation parks, the library. So the truth of the matter is the city's paying a lot of money for policing, and it seems like getting very little for what they're spending.
And now, to get more detail on some of these shocking cases, I'm joined by Sarah Schelke of the Life and Liberty Law Offices, a civil rights attorney who has battled the town of Loveland on behalf of several people you've seen in these videos. And she has been a tireless advocate for constitutional rights and has successfully defended several plaintiffs in their cases against the Loveland Police Department. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
First, can you describe why Ms. Love and Mr. Ham were parked there and what they were doing?
They had a firewood delivery business, and it was a very hot day. They had spent the day driving around delivering firewood with their 3 dogs, Bubba, Max, and Herkimer, and it was the last delivery they needed to make of the day. Someone had donated an ice box to them to use for another delivery recipient who wanted some kind of permanent storage container. So they had been up in the mountains. Some damage had happened in the ride down to that ice box. And so they thought, this appears to be in a vacant business lot. It's fenced back there. We won't bother anyone. We can, have the dogs get a stretch while we just touch up where the ice box had gotten damaged. And they thought they were going to be there, 15, 20 minutes tops in and out. And of course, then all this happened.
Can you tell us what we're seeing in the body camera video of Officer Grashorn? Why was he there and what did he do?
Business owner was apparently watching some remote, like watching surveillance video remotely, and had called the Loveland police just to say, hey, there's some people in my parking lot. And, I had some trouble with my dumpster lock once, and I want you to make sure they're not messing with it. He did tell them when he had called that they weren't anywhere near his dumpster. You can see they on video as well. They didn't go near the building. They were in the corner of the parking lot. But that's what Loveland was purporting to respond to.
So this was a call for alleged trespassing. Was the use of force here reasonable? I mean, one thing I noted is that the officer had options. He didn't choose to retreat or to return to the safety of his car.
From inception to all the way long after the shooting, we just see here, and I think this is why so many people are so upset about this video, is it's just juncture after juncture where this police officer, Officer Grasshorn, had a less violent, more compassionate, more common sense alternative available. Yeah, honestly, multitudinous such alternatives available, and just each time elected the worst possible decision. When he pulls up, you can see one of their dogs is asleep on the pavement, 20 yards off. I mean, we have the Dog Protection Act in Colorado that was passed in 2013. There's a lot of specific requirements for police officers in terms of giving owners an opportunity to get their dogs leashed up before they do something like ambush them and create a scenario where force is having to be used, which of course I don't think anybody still thinks that this would be, but he didn't do any of that. And what it looks like on video is that he was trying to sneak up on them. And when one dog begins to run towards him, he wanted to use his gun. And when Bubba, the first dog, was called off, Herkimer, who was asleep in the truck and came out to see what the excitement was about. I don't know how, it was, what was, I guess, devastating just for me as a dog owner and just as a member of this community is that this is like a broad daylight in the middle of a suburban town scenario that, yell all you want about a petty trespass or about like not having a dogs on leash type of thing. Those are still pretty reasonably foreseeable events in day-to-day garden variety life and policing. And for an officer to think that they can just, if the box is checked for even the slightest crime having been committed, that they can just start shooting, putting lives at risk, really. I mean, this is pavement, there's ricochet, there's actually a gas well like 10 yards off. It was just so reckless. There's so much recklessness in this, and just so much that there's just no explanation. There's no reasonable explanation for it. Nothing about this was reasonable. And starting with the shooting, but certainly going into once Herkimer was shot as well. I mean, the treatment of the family was just grotesque.
I found it strange that the officer denied allowing the family to take their dog to the vet, telling them it was too late and that they had to wait for backup to arrive. How is the family of the puppy Herkimer? How are they processing watching this shooting and being denied the chance to save their dog's life?
One way Wendy has put this event and describing it as, which I thought was poignant and relatable, she said that their lives, they had a life together as a family that ended that day and it dissolved in that moment. And you can see it and you can feel it as it happens. I mean, I felt watching that video like there was just no way I was prepared, that anyone could have prepared me for the gratuitousness of the violence upon somebody's family member by a police officer, by people who are supposed to be protecting us. It honestly killed part of my soul watching it. And I even spent like a few days driving around wondering if I could ever be happy again. And it wasn't my dog. It wasn't my, family member. It was Wendy and Jay's. And they, plunged into depression and suffered ceaselessly. I think they've both said they've only been able to watch the video once. And don't blame them. I wouldn't want to rewatch this. Max, their black lab mix, was very bonded to Herkimer as well, and he was never the same. Um, I don't know that we can expect anybody to really bounce back to being anything that they were before when a police officer just comes in and does something like that. There's no explanation for it.
Loveland PD has had other notable occasions where they used excessive and even lethal force. The case of Karen Garner, the 73-year-old woman with dementia who was brutally taken to the ground, comes to mind. And of course, the case of Alex Domina, the 19-year-old who was shot during a mental health crisis. We have watched video of police officers laughing while reviewing the body camera footage of Miss Garner's arrest. Do you think there's a problem with police culture?
I think there absolutely is. You know, the Karen Garner case is my case as well. And when I got that booking area footage and was listening to it with my paralegal, I mean, we were just in shock. Not just, you know, for what happened to Karen to have happened and the comments that were made during it. Obviously, there has to be something culturally going on in a police department for that public of a display, again, in broad daylight. There definitely has to be this inherent belief that they're never going to be held accountable, that they haven't been held accountable. There's a lot of things that have to be going on. But I'll tell you, when I heard them laughing, I heard the comment, you know, the ready for the pop about they were rewatching body cam of breaking her shoulder and pulling it up and literally, and she's crying in a cell, you know, 10 feet away, being deprived medical care. When I had that, I said that if the chief of this department doesn't resign after I release this, then the problems of this department are a million times worse than any of us can imagine. Because I don't know how any leadership could survive an incident like that unless it's so bad and so entrenched that you know, we can't wrap our heads around it, which I think is where we're getting to, right? I mean, they're under the scrutiny of Karen Garner, of, you know, I had a previous lawsuit with Preston Sowell, another broad daylight, just a citizen who doesn't want to talk to police. They break his shoulder. You know, this event with Herkimer, the shooting happens, and then, you know, under all of the public scrutiny of that, they shoot this 19-year-old kid, Alex Domina, in his backyard. Like, what is going on there in terms of, I mean, of course there's a cultural problem, but there's also has to be a training problem. There also has to be a serious leadership problem. And then, you know, I don't see how any of these things can happen without as well there just being a deeply foundational belief that nobody ever gets held accountable for what they're doing.
So thanks to technology, we're able to see videos of police actions, so we're able to trust the complaints of brutality and misconduct made by citizens. And now we know it's not just the Loveland police, that there's an epidemic of police violence. 3 people a day are killed by police in the U.S. What would you say would be helpful reforms or policies to curb police violence and misconduct?
So the very first one is easy, and it's really goes to what's going on in Loveland right now, which is the body-worn cameras, institution of those programs everywhere. You know, a lot of reporters have asked me over these past, you know, year and a half or so since I've had these boom, 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 one lawsuit after another with Loveland. You know, a lot of people just say, like, what do you think is going on? Loveland's just spiraling out of control. And, you know, what I've told them, and I firmly believe, is that has not been anything new in terms of police behavior going on in Loveland during the past 2 years. What's happened is that in May 2019, Loveland implemented body-worn camera programs. And they had been, you know, I've been practicing here for 11 years. I've been hearing stories, right? But when it's an officer's word against a citizen's word, there's not much we can do. What we had is really a fundamentally, deeply, foundationally toxic police department who implemented body-worn camera programs and didn't think they needed to change their behavior. And truly, that's how core the "we'll never be held accountable" belief is that we're being recorded now. We're not going to change anything because we're the protagonist in every story, and we'll figure out a justification later. So This is not, these past 2 years and this seemingly rapid fire lawsuits is not some kind of environmental cause. It's now we're just getting to have eyes on it, which is what makes the body camera so important.
Now, I think the question that still troubles me about what is going on in Loveland is why police seem to be so generally desensitized to the chaos they inflict. One theme that seems to permeate all of these fraught encounters is a general sense I get that the officers were not trying to preserve life, but instead are fairly quick to decide that ending it would be the solution to the problems before them. I mean, if you think about it, there are so many ways the encounters we've seen could have ended. A woman suffering dementia could have been escorted back inside the store to pay, as she had offered to do. Officer Matthew Grashorn could have retreated inside of his car rather than shoot an innocent dog. Officer Ash could have chosen to speak with other witnesses of the motorcycle accident and simply ignored Preston Sowell. And even in the turbulent encounter with Alex Domina, the officer had the option to retreat or even find Alex's guardian and escort her to safety and try at least to talk Alex down before shooting him 4 times. Which is why these examples of policing are so telling about the state of American law enforcement. They raise questions that might on the surface seem unremarkable, but I think reveal quite a bit about how police see us and how all of us, in a sense, have become suspect. It's a concept that Stephen and I have called blanket criminality. It's the notion that a community or a group of people is deemed criminal from the onset. It's the idea that the public, the civilians, the non-cops are somehow not worthy of the concept enshrined in our Constitution called the presumption of innocence. It's an idea that means that all of us are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise. And it's an extremely important concept because it means that our rights cannot be voided and our freedoms taken away until we are actually proven guilty of a crime. An idea that unless a prosecutor or cop can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that we're guilty, we should receive the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's a principle that evidently the Loveland police have completely forgotten. How else can you justify the ultimate act of denying someone's rights by subjecting them to violence or deadly force? How more explicit can your ignorance of the concept be when you pull your gun before you try to use simple common sense to solve a problem that offers more than one solution? To explain what I mean, consider a story that may seem unrelated but is actually indicative of the loss of our presumption of innocence in general and perhaps offers us a reason why. It involves a former U.S. Marine named Stephen Lara. He was driving in Nevada in February to visit relatives in California. Police pulled him over for allegedly following too close to a truck, but soon after that stop, something else unfolded that is even more troubling. Police asked Lara if they could search his car, and he consented. Soon, they found $87,000 in his trunk. Turns out Lara doesn't trust banks and keeps his money literally under his mattress. But to alleviate any concerns about the origin of the money, Lara produced ATM receipts that showed it all came legitimately from his accounts. But the police didn't care. They used drug-sniffing dogs to produce a false positive, and even though no drugs were found, they confiscated all of Lara's money. Every single penny. Lara's life savings were suddenly the property of a bunch of highway cops. Well, what happened to the money? Well, it literally went into the pockets of the police agency that confiscated it. That's because of a federal program known as adoption, which allows local police agencies to keep most of the money they seized, provided they give a share to the feds. But what makes this story relevant to the notion of our loss of the presumption of innocence is how the process works to seize the cash of innocent civilians. That's because the courts automatically assume the money is guilty. That is the result of criminal activity. In order for Lara to get his money back, he has to prove that the cash is innocent. In other words, if you have a lot of cash, the presumption is that both you and the money are presumed guilty until you can prove otherwise. Of course, after the press started asking the DEA for comment, they decided to give the money back. In other words, when the act of taking it was exposed in all its ugliness, the government decided that the money wasn't so guilty after all. But the point is that an expansive police state has conjured a way to literally rob people of their possessions. They have cultivated an industry built upon the presumption of guilt. That means we actually start out guilty and have to prove our worthiness to a judge or a court just to keep our own property. And doesn't this in some way relate to the police violence we witnessed in the videos earlier in the show? Doesn't the fact that the Loveland police are so quick to use violence that they have also deemed us unworthy of the right to the benefit of the doubt? Doesn't it appear that with all the evidence you've seen, that the police value our lives less because in some sense, this notion of presumed guilt has worked its way into the culture of law enforcement? I mean, how could you laugh while watching a 73-year-old woman's shoulder dislocated for a forgotten $14 tab? How could you think it was amusing to turn her suffering into a spectacle that is both justified and joyful for you? Well, I think you can see the answer to that question. It sheds a light on a very dark reality of American policing, that their business isn't law enforcement, it's actually making the presumption of guilt a way of life. I want to thank civil rights attorney for her time and sharing her experience of fighting for justice for the citizens of Loveland, Colorado. And of course, I have to thank intrepid reporter Stephen Janis for his incredible writing, research, and editing on this piece. Thank you, Stephen.
Taya, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And of course, I would like to thank friend of the show, Noli D, for her support. Thanks, Noli D. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can always message me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Twitter and Facebook. And please like and comment. It really does help. And of course, I read your comments and appreciate them. And I try to answer your questions whenever I can. And we do have a Patreon pinned below. So if you have the means and work like this is important to you, please consider a donation. My name is Taya Graham, and I am your host of the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there.